Video games can be a tricky little hurdle to clear sometimes. Within the lining of the code and data, there's almost always a world to learn about. However, sometimes it can come with the caveat of having to learn something that, to most, can be alienating. Even if nowadays I consider myself someone who's very seasoned in most genres of games, it wasn't always like that. I used to be a silly, silly fool. I was stuck in the endless cycle of jumping and shooting and shooting and jumping and shooting my load. But over time, I started to step out of my comfort zone and started warming up to genres I would have never considered before. At varying levels anyway. Still learning to like RPGs. But someday I could clear my doubt on those ones too. Because for the longest time, there was a different genre that I had yet to tame for myself. The FPS, or first-person shooter. For real, it was harder for me to get into these games than it is for some people to use my preferred pronouns. At the time, I didn't know if it was the perspective that threw me off, the movement and aiming at the same time, or the fact that I usually only saw boring gray and brown war shooters. So up until recently, like a couple years ago recently, I avoided the genre. And now I'm making a video essay about how I came to appreciate them. Funny how that works out, huh? My first step into the genre started with a game series that I had just become familiar with. In the process of wanting to play every Metroid game, and in turn summoning dread, you're welcome Metroid fans, yes! I more or less had to face my demons here. And as I played through the Metroid Prime trilogy, my thoughts were multi-layered. First off, despite these games being first-person games where you shoot, after playing others in the genre, I wouldn't call the Metroid Prime trilogy FPS games. They're more of first-person adventures, a translation of the original Metroid formula into a 3D space. Semantics aside though, they did help me get accustomed to the perspective. In fact, the first Metroid Prime was perfect for teaching me everything I needed to know about first-person games. Movement became second nature. Yes! Yes! Oh, no, wait, fuck. Well, maybe like third or fourth nature. But I learned it, I learned how to shoot, and I only got lost 24 times. Good stuff. Heck, I didn't even mind the Chozo artifacts that much. For those not in the know, they're basically little things that pop up at the end of the game. You gotta collect them all to get to the final boss. Which involves a lot of backtracking, but honestly in hindsight, not only is that kind of part of the Metroid style, but that also helped me learn the game's map more, and finally get the hang of first-person movement. It's like third nature now, I guess. Even if Prime 1 is still the weakest of the trilogy to me, it was an essential step on this journey, and I carried its lessons throughout the rest of it. If you're not well versed in first-person games and want to give them a shake, I'd honestly recommend this. It's aged surprisingly well. And as for Prime 2 and 3, they helped me a lot with mastering what I'd been taught. Prime 2 in particular is now one of my favorite games ever made because of its teaching methods. It didn't hesitate to kick my teeth in and rip me apart. And because of that, I had to learn to adapt and survive. The world of Dark Ether, the ammo system, and even the more traditionally Metroid things like the screw attack, all built on what worked before, and helped me dive even deeper into understanding FPS fundamentals. Combine that with its simple yet effective story, God I love these moths, and it creates a very different, more tense atmosphere than the other Prime games. It pushed me to what, at the time, felt like my limits, though we'll see in reality it hadn't even scratched the surface. As a Prime game, Prime 2 felt like an ideal evolution of the series that 3 unfortunately backpedaled on partway. Since I don't know where else to put this, the Gaming Brit made a phenomenal video on Prime 2, I can't recommend it enough. Prime 3 has some good ideas, and it still works well in capping off my curriculum and the basics, but ultimately I don't have much to say on the game. The motion controls work really well with the proper setup, I got to see a guy get impaled, it's a solid time. And as I finished my tour through the trilogy, it would only be a matter of time before I went into another trilogy of shooters. What can I say about Bioshock that hasn't been said already? Nothing, so I'll keep this section brief. While Bioshock is more of an FPS game than that of Metroid Prime, it still largely feels like its own thing. The game isn't solely about being a rootin' tootin' underwater shooter, it's about digging through this expansive world the game gives you, Rapture, and uncovering thing after thing that furthers your quest. The combat is just kind of an extra layer of exceedingly simple window dressing. But honestly, the world and its mechanics form together to create what's probably one of my most unforgettable gaming experiences in a long time. The atmosphere of Rapture is just suffocating. It's crazy how cohesive and real it all feels even now. Like you could just take a bite out of it. Don't do that, actually. And even if certain things fell out of place, or just outright bad, I won't forget my time with the game. The other two are also fine. Didn't gel with them as much, but they're solid games. After a decent enough time in both Metroid and Bioshock, I took a small break from shooter games. However, I would soon be drawn back in by a 1-2 punch given to me by the generosity of a friend. And this action would draw blood. New blood, even. I'm sorry, that was dreadful. However, it is the perfect segue for a quick aside about New Blood Interactive. They're a newer independent studio that makes a lot of retro-inspired games. Though they're most known for their retro shooter jams, they have made other things. Those shooty boys are just what gets that dough for the bread bank. Games inspired by those good old crusty 90s shooters like Quake, Doom, and... not you. Well, maybe you? I don't know, I didn't research that much for this. This is a very opinion-based essay, Duke. And their two biggest games to my knowledge are DUSK and ULTRAKILL. And while I would eventually see the brilliance behind these games, my first experiences were a little rocky. So to start with DUSK, I was given this game with the information of it being a sort of gothic horror themed shooter. And well, that sure is what it is. While horror dev and Twitter shitposter David Shemansky clearly wears his inspirations on his sleeve with DUSK, the game has enough of its own identity through how it combines its gameplay and aesthetics. The horror tone creates a game that is both intense, yet liberating to complete. The game isn't afraid to make the player feel uneasy at times, and the low-poly aesthetic surprisingly complements that pretty well. It lets the imagination run wild with the intimidating creatures the player is presented with, and when things are more legible, it only raises further questions. And the movement in the game works for both battling your way through these eldritch horrors, or running away like a little wee piss baby. It's all very good, and I do love me some horror, so why didn't this click with me? I mean, I enjoyed it, but after an hour I stopped playing, and since then I have yet to go back to it. I don't remember, truthfully. Maybe I need to wait for the right time and pick it back up. However, in the time after trying out DUSK, I got to try out another game. And this one was a doozy. ULTRAKILL is one phenomenal game. It's got a crazy fast pace, and packed together with its razor-sharp level design and bitchin' soundtrack, it's become sort of a modern classic among retro-inspired shooters. It takes the best parts of movement-based shooters and fuses them with the stylings of Devil May Cry, in a display that just feels proud of itself, and rightfully so. And the wildest thing is it's still in early access. However, all that being said, when I first played it, it almost took my interest in shooters and shoved it off a cliff. Jumping into the game's demo, which still works on a much earlier build of the game, I was bombarded and overwhelmed by various questionable design choices that had since been buffed out in the paid release. However, at the time I did not have the means to play said release, so those combined with the aggressive difficulty and my rustiness for shooters almost made me feel as though maybe it was all for naught. That if I wanted to play shooters, maybe I should stick to my Metroid Primes. I mean, spoilers, later in this story I do end up going back to the game, but that wouldn't be for a while after I played the demo. And yet, despite that, I ended up giving things one more shake with a different game. And well, after being overwhelmed like that, my next experience with the genre would probably be less intense, right?
Wrong!
Photosensitivity warning for the next section of the video. Post Void is freaking nuts, dude. This was another gift I got from a friend, and unlike the last gift I got, this one I went into with no expectations. How did that work out for me? Well, the first thing to know about Post Void is that it is extremely rapid fire. This is a game that'll not hesitate to beat you to death if you hesitate for even a moment.
The only thing that fell is this little box. What's inside? That's ridiculous.
It's because of this that the game encourages fast movement with its procedural design philosophy. Enemies will keep coming through these labyrinths that are built differently each time, and there's no time to waste. Just keep going and never look back. Despite the game's asinine difficulty and flashing colors wearing down on me at first though, its short length and high skill ceiling kept me coming back. And well, it's because of that I was able to make another dent in my mental blockade against shooters. If a method in one run didn't work, I could try different weapons or other upgrades to bust my way through. And even if I still have yet to make it through this 10-minute long game, the fact that it is so short makes it so replayable for me. I got addicted for a bit, I'll admit. It definitely feels like a sort of get good or die trying kind of game, but I still have to respect what it's done here. There's not much I have to say about the game itself, but its importance for my journey should not be understated. And it's only like $3 on Steam too. If you don't have issues with photosensitivity, I definitely recommend it. It's simple, but effective. It's mashed together the best of movement shooters with some roguelike elements, and even if I'm not huge on either of those genres, two wrongs did make a right in this case. And I couldn't be happier for that, because it led to me giving ULTRAKILL another shot. And, well... yeah, this game is based. I mean, I knew that before, but actually feeling that for myself now really opens my eyes. So to give this game the introduction it deserves, ULTRAKILL is an early access game that launched back in 2020, and I can only describe it as the video game form of the you, me, gas station meme. If you don't know that,
Bear fight, bare-handed, bare naked? Oh yes, please. We befriend the bear after we beat it in a brawl, then we ride it into a Chuck E. Cheese. Dance, dance, revolution. Revolution? Overthrow the government? I think so. Next thing you know, I'm reincarnated as Jesus Christ. Then I turn into a jet, fly into the sun, black out again, wake up, do a bump, white out, which I didn't know you could do, then I smoked a joint.
its combat is overloaded with adrenaline. You've got your normal sort of shooter mechanics, but also, you can punch projectiles back at enemies. You can flip a coin into the air and punch it to deal extra damage to an enemy. You can parry an enemy's attack to get a temporary health boost. You can blast a hole beneath the enemy's feet as they fall into a meat grinder. There's a lot of little things that just really make the whole package feel action-packed. And again, I must stress, this game has a bitchin' soundtrack. When the game isn't pushing its players to the absolute limits, you're ripping and tearing through so many enemies it feels otherworldly. And while yes, I still have yet to be really great at the game, even dying to some ridiculous circumstances, I've come very far since my first attempts, and I can't wait to know more and play even better. Heck, that good friend of mine who gifted me DUSK was kind enough to give me some footage of later stuff in the game. And between the techniques she showed off and what the later levels have in store, I know this game will stay banging. Hell, they even got Gianni Matrograno on to voice a character.
I shall rend you apart, and you will become inanimate once more. Behold, the power of an angel!
Though apparently he does a lot of voice stuff in New Blood's games, including this one where he takes a fat shit.
Finally. Been holding this in forever. Alright, here it goes.
This goes on for 5 minutes.
Overall, this experience has taught me a lot. I was able to open my eyes up to a new genre that before just seemed like it wasn't for me. And now I'm eyeing various games that I want to give a fair shake sometime. Though I should probably get back to DUSK first, I can't really afford doubling my backlog at the moment. Either way, I guess the takeaway of this whole thing is that sometimes it's good to broaden your horizons. Try it sometime, you goofs.